This is my car, and it was recently very broken. We're talking so broken that I wouldn't even have to drive in it. You see, my car failed its legal inspection, but not just once, it failed twice. So in today's video I'll be talking you through the journey from where it went from being too dangerous to drive to now where it's better than ever. I have always been a car guy, and I love taking care of my car. I'm also an optimist, and I take things as they come. Most people would take their car to a mechanic to check it over before they drive it into the inspection hall. But I was optimistic and I didn't feel like spending that money. So I drove it into the inspection hall with high hopes. So I'm fresh out of the inspection hall and it failed dramatically. Now that it failed drastically, it's time to get to work. And even though I like cars, I had to call for some help. Meet my best friend, Magnus. He knows a thing or two about cars. Now my car had 4 predominant fails, which needed to be fixed. Now the first thing that was wrong with my car was the headlights. You see, these were heavily sun faded and they gave off the wrong light beam. The second thing that was wrong was a dust cup in the right side of the suspension. Then we had the rear exhaust. This was sagging and was too low. The fourth and the final thing that was broken, this was the worst thing, was the front left suspension. The spring here was broken. That explains why it's been jumpy and driving a bit uneven. After assessing the damage, we went to work. We started with the suspension, which would be the biggest task. And whilst we had the suspension off, then we might as well upgrade it. Introducing coilovers. These are just going to take my car to the next level. But as you will find out later in the video, they also cost us some trouble. And the coilovers won't be the only mod I'll be doing to the car.
And since my mud flap is gone on this side, I'm gonna be deleting it on the other side as well.
To get to the front suspension struts, some trim pieces had to come off. Once everything was unbolted, then it was disassembly time. We didn't have jacks though, silly us. Good thing we had some big brain energy and we improvised a contraption, as you can see right here, consisting of a piece of wood, a rusty metal pole and some optimism. But this worked like magic, somewhat. But after some hammering on the front suspension, it started to come out. But then disaster struck. Not really, but this did happen though.
Hello, what's gone wrong?
Now what happened here was one of the axles were pulled out in the process of getting the front suspension out, and there were gearbox oil dripping from the car. Nothing too major, nothing we could not fix, but it would cost us some more time and money. The rest of the install of the front suspension went pretty smooth from here, and then it was on to the rear. Now the rear suspension, which was much easier to install. Here Magnus, as he did all the serious work, here Magnus had to install the shock and the spring separately. The shock went on a lot easier, as it was an easier assembly with more space. The only challenge we experienced here was this contraption. The contraption, as it's officially called, had to be installed right here through this hole. But the contraption was too big for the hole and we didn't have the right tools to fix it. This was a 2-day project, so we would finish this part on day 2. Day 1 wasn't all suspension though, we also fixed the exhaust. The exhaust was sagging due to this. The bracket was completely rusted through and the previous owner had welded it to the back box. So out with the bolts holding it together and out came the saw. This was one of my bigger contributions, as handling a saw is pretty simple. Off came the old bracket, and after some struggle with a tight new bracket, the back box was finally fixed and up to legal requirements. The dust cuff was one of the more simple things to fix, as all it took was a cable tie or zip tie. The most holy tool in car culture. And now 2 of the 4 things were fixed. Now the other tasteful mod, which I mentioned earlier, is the D-badge.
We're also gonna be doing a D-badge, so this ugly ass thing is going, this is going, and this one is going. So it's only gonna be the lion.
This was also one of my jobs, as it was very simple. Step 1, remove the lettering. Step 2, remove the glue. Step 3, clean the surface, and done. This is the final result. Stick around for the end of the video to see the complete result of all the things done to the car. Now we left day 1 with a bit of an experiment, which I had seen from Chris Fix. See, my headlights were heavily sun faded, so we masked off a small area of the headlights,
which we just sanded, and this is the result after the clear coat, and it just has to dry now, and then we'll see a before and after results.
Hopefully this would work, so I didn't have to buy new headlights, but this was all for day 1. Day 2, and today we had to finish all the last projects. Magnus, being the mechanic he is studying to become, went ahead with the rear suspension, and I was moral support, as well as continuing with the wet sanding experiment. Magnus went straight to work with the drill and the correct drill bit, which we were missing on day 1, and then the left side was finished in no time. However, the right side was missing something. You see, the left side had this plastic cover to hold everything in place, but the right side didn't have it. This called for some great DIY work from Magnus, some scrap metal and an angle grinder, and then we had a replacement piece in no time. We could then reassemble the rear and take the suspension off the list as complete. Now, the last thing that needed to be complete was the experiment with the headlights, and after following Chris Fick's advice, we ended up with this. It actually looked great. But as time went on and the clear coat dried, we realized that this wasn't enough. The headlight still looked foggy. That's not to say Chris Fick's method doesn't work, but my headlights were beyond saving. Magnus found some very cheap ones, and we fitted those on instead, and they looked much better. So for a second time we drove the car to the inspection hall, this time with more confidence in my car, and I believed that it would pass inspection. Everything was also going great, and they even registered the coilovers into the system. But there was one issue, one stupid little mistake that we overlooked.
Now you might ask yourself, what is that little mistake that we overlooked which caused it to fail the second time? Well, the car was too low.
The only solution? Well, we had to raise it by about 1 centimeter in the front and 2 centimeters in the back. And to our realization, that would be the top of the coilover's adjustability. This, fortunately, was a lot easier than we thought, and we could fix it in just about 2 hours in a driveway. This time there was nothing that could fail the car. Everything was looked over. Now there was just one thing left to do, and that was to hope and pray for the best. And it passed! I could now finally drive my car again, and it was almost the same feeling as buying your first car. The freedom of just being able to do whatever you want. And I learned a lesson from this. Always check things through first and be prepared. It will save you great amounts of time and money. But I can't just end the video here. The car was still raised and looked goofy. Luckily I had a crazy friend, and there was a parking lot just across the inspection hall. So 40 minutes after it had passed, my car was slammed again. And here is a final walk around. It does look great when it sits lower than just stuck. So yeah, that is everything I wanted to cover in this video. And apparently YouTube suggests that you watch this video, so I suggest you click it too. Go on now.